You've probably wondered, at some point, why certain struggles seem to follow you like shadows you can't outrun. Not just bad habits or tough circumstances, but something deeper. A pull, a compulsion, a strange magnetism toward what you know destroys you. For some, this pull shows up as anger. For others, it's control. And for many, it's alcohol, a vice dressed as comfort, cloaked in celebration, yet silently devouring everything sacred. Maybe you've never questioned it before, or maybe you've tried to reason with it. You've told yourself it's just stress, just your upbringing, just something to manage. But what if I told you that alcohol is not just a chemical, it's a karmic chain, a spiritual thread woven through lifetimes. And every time you reach for it, you're not just answering today's craving, you're responding to echoes from a past you've forgotten. Imagine a man who walks into a bar for the first time, not because he's in pain or in need of distraction, but because something inside him feels oddly at home. The smell, the sound of glasses clinking, the burn of that first swallow. It doesn't feel foreign to him, it feels familiar, like returning to an old role he once played. He doesn't know why, but alcohol feels like a friend. And over time, that friendship becomes a cage. He's tried to quit, he's read the books, taken the advice, blamed stress, blamed genetics, blamed everything he can see. But the truth remains invisible. It's not just about what's happening in this life, it's about what was left unresolved in others. You see, his relationship with alcohol didn't start here. It started long before he had a name or a body. It started in another chapter of his soul's story. And he's not alone. There are souls who return to this world already carrying the seed of addiction. They don't realize it at first, because this world teaches them to see only what's in front of them, but their souls remember. They remember the past lives spent drowning in the same substance, lives where they drank to forget, where they pushed others to drink for profit, power, or pleasure, where they hurt others in ways they no longer recall, but their energy still carries the weight. Alcohol, for some souls, is not just a danger. It's a recurring pattern, a karmic loop, a magnet that draws them back to the same spiritual lesson they refused to learn the last time. They may have been the victim of it in one life, and the cause of suffering in another, but either way, the story remains unfinished. And so, the soul returns, hoping this time, they will see what they couldn't before. That's why some people fall into addiction without any clear reason. They weren't abused, they weren't raised in chaos. They had loving homes, stable jobs, supportive friends, but something inside them was already broken, not from this lifetime, but from another, and the bottle was simply the mirror that reflected it. We're told that alcohol numbs pain, but it also numbs memory, and for a soul haunted by karmic wounds, that numbness is seductive. It offers a moment of silence, a moment where the soul doesn't have to feel the heavy echoes of other lives, but it comes at a cost, because with every drink, the soul sinks deeper into forgetting, in deeper, and farther away from healing. This is not punishment, this is not judgment, this is simply the law of spiritual momentum. The soul returns to the lessons it hasn't yet mastered. And when the lesson is addiction, it returns again and again until the pattern is broken not just at the surface, but at the root. You may be someone who has struggled with alcohol yourself, or maybe you've watched someone you love be consumed by it. And in those moments, you've probably asked, why? Why can't they stop? Why can't they see what it's doing to them? But what if they're not just fighting the drink in front of them? What if they're fighting lifetimes of entanglement they've never been shown how to heal? The pull toward alcohol can be spiritual in nature, not just emotional or physical. It can be the residue of lifetimes where the soul used alcohol to escape pain it didn't know how to face. Or worse, lifetimes where alcohol was used as a weapon, a tool to control, to exploit, to destroy. And now, in this life, the soul is being given a chance to face what it once denied. That's why the craving can feel so irrational. Why it can show up in moments of joy just as easily as moments of despair. Because it's not about the moment. It's about the memory. Not the one in your brain, but the one in your spirit. Alcohol, in these cases, isn't just a substance. It's a signal. A symbol of unfinished business. And until that business is resolved, the craving returns like clockwork. The world will tell you to fix it with therapy, with medication, with accountability and structure. And yes, all of that helps. But if you never ask the deeper question, if you never look beneath the behavior to the soul, you might find yourself treating the symptom, but not the wound. This isn't about blame, this is about awareness. When you start to view addiction through the lens of the soul, everything changes. You stop seeing it as weakness and start seeing it as a call for awakening. You realize that the person who drinks isn't just numbing today's pain, they're being haunted by yesterday's debt. And that haunting doesn't stop just because this body dies. It follows, it re-emerges, it waits, unless the chain is broken. The chain isn't physical, it's vibrational, energetic, it's woven into the very fabric of your soul's memory. That's why some souls can walk away from alcohol easily, while others feel like they're fighting an invisible force, because they are. And the only way to break it is to see it, not with guilt, but with spiritual clarity. You must be willing to ask, where did this start? Not in the childhood, not in the trauma, but beyond. You must be willing to look at your life as one page in a much longer book. And then you must read the parts you've forgotten, because within those pages lies the reason, and within the reason lies the redemption. It's not enough to abstain, not enough to survive. The soul wants healing, it wants integration. It wants to remember who it was before the addiction. And that journey doesn't begin in the bottle. It begins in the silence behind the craving, in the moment where you pause and say, this isn't just about now, this is about then. The invisible chain begins to break the moment you stop seeing alcohol as the enemy and start seeing it as the messenger. It came into your life for a reason, not to punish, but to awaken. And if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to see the deeper pattern, then something miraculous can begin. Not just sobriety, but liberation. You've likely felt it before. A pull towards something that defies logic, a compulsion that seems to arise not from choice, but from something ancient moving through you. It's not just habit. It's not just behavior, it's memory, not of this life, but of another. Beneath the surface of your current self is a river of echoes, fragments of lives you've lived before, choices you've made, people you've hurt or healed, and consequences that still cling to the energetic fabric of your soul. Addiction, in many cases, is not born from this life alone. It is a haunting whisper from another time, resurfacing in the present, asking to be acknowledged, healed, and transcended. Reincarnation is not a poetic idea for dreamers. It is the architecture of your spiritual journey. You, the consciousness behind your eyes, have existed far longer than this current identity can remember. And as you've moved from life to life, you've carried more than just talents, affinities, or fears. You've carried energy, and that energy, unresolved, unbalanced, or deeply wounded, manifests itself in ways that are often misdiagnosed as mere psychological patterns. Addiction is one of those manifestations. But beneath the craving, beneath the physical grip of the substance, there is often something much deeper, an unhealed moment from another life, trying to express itself through this one. Imagine for a moment that the intense pull toward alcohol isn't just about this life's stresses or trauma. What if it is also a continuation, a karmic echo from a life where you used alcohol to control others, numb responsibility, or escape accountability? Perhaps you were once a merchant who profited from others' downfall, knowingly feeding their destruction. Or maybe you were a victim of intoxicants forced upon you during war or ritual, and now the soul replays the cycle in search of resolution. These aren't metaphors, they are very real, energetic imprints that continue until understood. The soul remembers everything, even when the conscious mind does not. What you call instinct, impulse, or addiction might actually be the soul's attempt to balance a scale that was tipped long ago. Alcohol, in particular, has a vibration that resonates with emotional numbing, energetic detachment, and spiritual forgetfulness. So when a soul has unresolved guilt or spiritual debt connected to alcohol use from another incarnation, it often finds itself drawn back to it, lifetime after lifetime. Not because it wants to be enslaved, but because it seeks liberation. And sometimes, the soul will unconsciously recreate the pain it once caused in order to understand it from the other side. This is how karmic learning unfolds. Many people suffering with alcoholism feel an inexplicable sense of shame or grief even before their addiction takes hold. They say things like, "I've always felt like something was wrong with me," or "I was born with this darkness inside." What if they're right, but not in the way they think? That darkness may not be a defect. It may be an old chapter replaying itself, asking to be rewritten. You are not weak for having an addiction. You are remembering something ancient. You are standing at the edge of a cycle that has likely looped across centuries. And whether you are here to break it for yourself or for your lineage, your presence in this moment is not an accident. Unhealed wounds do not disappear when the body dies. They are carried within the soul's energetic blueprint. And if not transmuted through understanding, action, and transformation, they reappear in the next life, often more urgently than before. This is why people with seemingly good lives still fall into the depths of addiction. Their current circumstances do not explain the gravity of their suffering. Because the root is not in the visible, it's in the invisible. It's in the soul. Now, imagine this. A man in this lifetime finds himself unable to resist the bottle. He loses everything: family, friends, purpose. He enters rehab again and again, each time vowing to never return, only to fall back deeper. What if, in another lifetime, he encouraged entire communities to intoxicate themselves for profit? What if he led others into ruin so he could rise in power or wealth? What if the very pain he now feels is the reflection of what he once caused? This is not punishment. This is reflection, not as judgment, but as opportunity, the opportunity to heal. And the opposite is also true. Some people who struggle with addiction in this life were once the victims of such patterns in previous incarnations. They were harmed by others' manipulation, and now, through the addiction, they learn to reclaim their sovereignty. The soul doesn't assign blame, it seeks experience. It seeks expansion through polarity, 9,000 kinds, through both sides of the same coin. This is the great curriculum of reincarnation, to learn through becoming, through doing, and through enduring, until balance is restored. Compulsion is rarely about the substance itself, it's about the energy behind the act. If you feel pulled toward alcohol in ways that feel unnatural, suffocating, or overwhelming, you are likely interacting with a karmic pattern. It is not just the drink, it is the story beneath the drink. It is the memory encoded in the cells of your energy body, urging you to look inward. And the tragedy is not in having the addiction, the tragedy is in not realizing the deeper message hidden within it. For when you start to see your addiction as a message from another life, a breadcrumb left by your own soul, you can begin to reclaim the power it seemed to take from you. This is why healing must go beyond behavior. True healing happens when you begin to remember, not just who you are, but who you've been. You don't need to know the exact scenes, names, or eras. You simply need to be willing to accept that what haunts you may not have started here, and that you, brave, exhausted, searching you, are not broken. You are in the process of breaking free. What you carry is not a flaw, it is a map, and if you follow it inward, with honesty and sacred curiosity, you will find the original wound. You will find the forgotten vow, the silent regret, the karmic bond that needs releasing. And from that moment forward, you are no longer a victim of the pattern. You become its alchemist. So if alcohol has touched your life, whether through your own struggle or someone else's, understand this: it is not random, it is not meaningless. It is an echo from another lifetime, and your presence in this moment means you are ready to hear it, ready to understand, ready to transform. This is not the end, this is the remembering, and remembering is the beginning of liberation. You've been told that karma is punishment, that when something bad happens to you, it's because you did something wrong, that suffering is some kind of cosmic revenge, but that's not how the soul sees it. Karma isn't about pain for pain's sake. It's not a system of moral judgment. Karma is the physics of the spirit. It is cause and effect at the level of energy. What you send out into the world, in thought, in action, in intention, must eventually return to you, not to punish you, to teach you, to complete the circuit of your soul's experience. Imagine throwing a stone into a still lake. Ripples form, they travel out in every direction, but eventually, those ripples meet the edge, rebound, and find their way back to the point of impact. The lake remembers. The energy doesn't disappear. It circles back, not to hurt you, but to bring you face to face with the reality you created. That's karma, a return, a mirror, a teacher. Now consider alcohol, not as a drink, not as a drug, but as energy. When someone uses it in a way that harms others, NKZ, when they manipulate, neglect, destroy, or degrade, energy goes out. It echoes. It creates waves in the unseen world. Those waves do not vanish. They wait. They follow. And eventually, in this life or another, they come back, not to destroy, but to reveal. To say, look, this is what you created. Do you see it now? This is why addiction can feel so heavy, because it rarely belongs to just one moment in time. It's often the culmination of many lifetimes of misdirected energy, not always out of malice, but out of ignorance. The soul forgets until it doesn't. And when that memory starts to stir, often through the experience of addiction, it's not cruelty, it's a chance, a doorway. The soul learns not by being told, but by living both sides. If you once ignored the suffering of someone caught in addiction, you may return to feel what they felt. If you once profited from the sale of substances that caused destruction, you may return as someone who cannot stop drinking, wondering why no help seems to work. This isn't revenge, it's sacred balance. The soul is given the opportunity to become whole, and wholeness requires understanding, and understanding requires experience. That's why alcoholism, at the soul level, is rarely random. It is often the soul's attempt to rebalance energy that was once scattered, distorted, or misused. When someone drinks to the point of harm, over and over again, it's not just a behavioral issue, it's an energetic signal. It says, there's something here that needs to be seen, something old, something unresolved. The body may crave alcohol, but the soul craves freedom. And the craving is the clue. It is the sign that something is out of alignment, not just chemically, but spiritually. It is the soul's way of signaling that a pattern is trying to complete itself. You cannot heal it by shame. You cannot erase it by willpower alone, because what you're dealing with is not just biology. You're dealing with karma, and karma isn't stored in your bloodstream. It's stored in your vibration. Every act creates an echo. Every intention shapes the next step. And when a soul has lived many lives where alcohol was used as a tool of harm, the energy of those acts remains. It lingers like smoke in the chambers of the spirit. And so the soul returns to a body, a life, a family, and finds itself inexplicably drawn to the very thing it once misused. This is not failure. This is design. The soul returns to the scene of the imbalance, not because it is cursed, but because it is ready to remember. And yet, when that remembering begins, it doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like suffering. It feels like chaos, like collapse. That's the trap. That's where many fall again. Because they think the pain is proof that they're broken. But in truth, the pain is proof that the soul is trying to realign, trying to shake off the weight of old energy so it can rise. Alcoholism is often an outward sign of inward imbalance. Not because someone is weak, but because the soul is trying to balance a karmic scale. And until that energy is seen for what it is, the cycle repeats. Not just in this life, but in the next, and the next, until awareness is born. Awareness doesn't come from judgment, it comes from stillness, from honesty, from asking the deeper question, why is this here? What am I here to learn from this pattern? When you stop fighting the addiction as a monster and start listening to it as a messenger, something shifts. You begin to understand that every drink taken in despair, every lie told in secret, every moment lost in shame, all of it is part of a larger equation, and you're not being punished. You're being invited to restore what has been lost. The soul's law is simple. Whatever you throw into the world must return, not because someone in the sky demands it, but because energy is circular. It wants completion. So if you send out pain, pain returns. If you send out compassion, compassion returns. If you take from others, life will eventually place you in a position where you feel what it's like to lose, not as punishment, as education. And this is where the real miracle begins. Because once you understand that addiction is not just a burden, but an opportunity, you can choose differently. You can stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "What am I here to resolve?" The moment you shift into that awareness, you stop being a victim of karma and start becoming its student. And that's where karma begins to dissolve, not through perfection, not through guilt, but through conscious correction. When you begin to respond to your patterns with love instead of judgment, when you help others who struggle instead of judging them, when you live with awareness instead of denial, you begin to rewrite the pattern, and what once seemed like a curse reveals itself as a sacred assignment. You are not here to suffer for the past. You are here to complete it, to balance what has been unbalanced, to bring light where there was once darkness. The addiction is not who you are. It's simply the echo of who you've been, and when you see that clearly, you can make a new choice, not just for this life, but for all the lives still to come. Because every choice you make today becomes the karma of tomorrow. Every thought you carry becomes a ripple in the lake of your future. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to be aware. And with that awareness, everything begins to change. The loop slows, the chain loosens, the soul rises, and what once seemed like an endless cycle reveals itself as the very path that leads you home. There is a place beyond time, beyond space, beyond memory as you know it, a realm where every thought, action, intention, and emotion you've ever experienced is preserved with absolute clarity. It isn't written in ink or etched into stone, but recorded energetically in what many mystics have described as the Akashic records. This is not a metaphor. It is a real vibrational field, a spiritual archive that holds the full story of your soul's journey across all incarnations. You've walked many paths, worn many names, touched many lives, and all of it, every detail, is alive within this infinite memory of existence. The Akashic records do not forget, they do not judge, they do not punish, but they reflect with unerring precision. Whatever you have sent into the world, when you are so, through action, intention, or emotion, has been absorbed into this great field of truth. When you have harmed others, that imprint remains. When you have loved, that too is preserved. And so, when a soul returns to the earthly plane, it does so accompanied by the energetic echoes of all that came before. These echoes form patterns, and if those patterns have not been understood, healed, or balanced, they reappear, not as coincidence, but as spiritual law. Addiction, when viewed from the surface, appears to be purely behavioral or psychological, but the Akashic records reveal otherwise. They show how addiction can be a karmic thread, woven through lifetimes, anchored in moments of pain, abuse, exploitation, or betrayal, either received or inflicted. Alcohol, in particular, is a substance whose energetic consequences ripple widely. It is not only consumed, it is often weaponized. It has been used to manipulate, to numb, to dominate, to escape. And when the energy surrounding alcohol becomes distorted in one life, it frequently re-emerges in the next. The records do not display this with shame or scorn, they simply show the truth of a soul who, in one life, may have served others alcohol in excess to profit from their destruction. Perhaps a tavern owner who encouraged addiction for gain, fully aware of the lives crumbling under the influence. Perhaps a figure in power who introduced alcohol into a culture to weaken resistance, dilute spirit, and erode clarity. The soul may leave the body at death, but these acts do not vanish. They are recorded in the Akasha, vibrational signatures etched into the soul's field. In another life, that same soul may be born with a powerful craving for alcohol, seemingly unprovoked. The compulsion arises early, even before trauma can be pointed to. It feels innate, ancestral, inevitable. But in truth, it is a memory, not a conscious one, but an energetic one. The Akashic imprint pulls the soul back toward the very force it once misused. Not as punishment, but as opportunity. Opportunity to understand from the other side, to experience the cost of what was once inflicted, to feel the gravity of choice, and, if chosen, to heal. One story told within these records is of a woman who, in a distant life, administered intoxicating brews to enslaved workers, numbing their pain while keeping them compliant. She believed she was being compassionate, 19-2, softening their suffering, but in truth, she was suppressing their voice. In her next incarnation, she was born with a subtle but persistent addiction. It began with wine, a social indulgence, but quickly became a dependency. Each attempt to quit was met with an invisible resistance. Only when she began spiritual work did she glimpse the truth, that the addiction was not from this life alone. It was a residue of choices made long ago, now demanding awareness and reversal. In another case, a man found himself always surrounded by alcoholics. Friends, partners, even strangers gravitated toward him, each entangled in their own dependency. He was not addicted himself, but his life was constantly shaped by the chaos of addiction. It wasn't random. The records revealed that in another life, he led ceremonies where intoxication was sacred, but his guidance was corrupted by pride. He pushed others beyond their limits, intoxicated by control more than the drink itself. Now, in this lifetime, he is offered the chance to become a source of support, not dominion. To choose compassion over control. To offer clarity where once he offered distortion. Every soul's journey is unique, but the law remains constant. What you create energetically will echo until it is met with conscious transformation. The Akashic records are not a place of punishment, but of awareness. They do not force you to relive anything, they simply mirror the energy you have put forth, and they wait for you to see, feel, and understand. Alcohol-related harm leaves a signature, not because the substance is inherently evil, but because it alters consciousness. And when that altered state is used to hurt, deceive, or escape, the soul registers it as imbalance. That imbalance must be corrected, eventually, through embodied experience. But here's what most don't realize. The records are not just archives. They are dynamic, living fields of possibility. They change the moment you do, the moment you forgive, the moment you understand, the moment you choose differently. Every act of sobriety is not just physical, it is spiritual revision. Every time you resist the urge, every time you speak truth where you once spoke denial, the records shift. You are literally rewriting the story of your soul. You are altering the energetic pattern that once seemed destined to repeat, and it doesn't require perfection. The records honor sincerity. If your intention is pure, if your heart is genuinely reaching toward wholeness, the weight begins to lift. You are not condemned by your past lives, you are empowered by them, because the records hold not only your mistakes, they hold your courage, your resilience, your divine potential. When you step into that potential, the records become light, and what was once a karmic chain becomes a spiritual key. So if addiction is part of your story, or part of someone you love, understand this: it is not random, it is not meaningless, it is a message from your soul to your soul. And within that message lies a choice. You can numb it, you can repeat it, or you can answer it, with awareness, with compassion, with transformation. The Akashic records are not closed books, they are open mirrors, and when you look into them with truth, you do not just see your past, you glimpse your power to shape the future. The vice of alcohol may have followed you from another lifetime, but it does not own you. You are not your patterns, you are the presence that sees them, you are the light that can end them. And the moment you choose that light, the moment you become it, the records begin to change. Not someday, not after death, but now, in this breath, in this choice, in this life. There are things that happen when you drink that go far beyond what science can measure. You already know, alcohol affects your body, your speech slurs, your judgment fades, your awareness dims. But what you may not realize is that these physical effects are only the surface of something far more significant. Alcohol doesn't just dull your senses, it lowers your vibration. And when your vibration drops, you become open, porous, exposed. In that lowered state, something ancient and unseen can begin to slip in. You might have felt it before but didn't have words for it. The way your thoughts become unfamiliar after a few drinks. The way your behavior changes, not just in predictable ways, but in ways that feel alien to who you know yourself to be. The sudden rage, the dark urges, the impulsive chaos. It's not just you being drunk. Sometimes, it's something else using your body as a channel, something that doesn't belong to you. There are entities in this universe that do not seek your highest good. Not demons in the cartoonish sense, not creatures with horns and pitchforks, but energies. Forms of consciousness that exist in lower vibrational realms, and these entities thrive in chaos, fear, addiction, and despair. They feed off of disconnection, and they are drawn to people who consistently lower their vibration, especially through substances like alcohol. You see, when you drink to the point of unconsciousness, your energetic field, your aura, weakens. It's like the locks on your spiritual doors suddenly click open. And if you keep opening those doors night after night, year after year, certain energies begin to linger, attach, observe. At first, they whisper. They encourage one more drink, one more reckless decision, one more night lost to oblivion. But over time, the whispers become influence, influence becomes presence, and presence becomes possession, not in the horror movie sense, but in a real, subtle, spiritual way that alters your path without you even realizing it. Not every addiction is purely psychological. Not every craving comes from trauma or habit. Some cravings are not even yours. They are implanted, amplified, recycled by entities that have found a way to feed through you. They don't need to fully take over to impact your life. All they need is a crack, a moment when you drop your guard, a moment when your pain becomes an invitation. Many of these entities are remnants of other souls who never fully crossed over. Some are fragments, shards of consciousness that broke away during trauma, violence, or intoxication. Others are simply wanderers, drawn to places and people where the energy is chaotic enough to mirror their own. Bars, nightclubs, homes filled with addiction and despair, these are not just physical places. They are spiritual ecosystems, and not all who dwell there are human. Have you ever noticed how drinking too much can lead to a kind of amnesia? You wake up and can't remember what you said, what you did, where you went. And even worse, sometimes you remember, but you don't recognize yourself in the memory. You watch your own behavior like a stranger looking in from the outside. That's not a coincidence. That's what happens when your consciousness takes a back seat. When your spiritual energy is so disoriented that it can no longer maintain full sovereignty over your vessel, and in those moments, something else can begin to steer. You may have blamed yourself for the things you've done in those states, and yes, accountability matters, but so does awareness. Because what if some of that wasn't entirely your energy? What if you've been carrying something that doesn't even belong to you? What if the sadness, the rage, the urge to self-destruct, what if parts of that came from a presence that latched onto you during your lowest point? These parasitic entities are not invincible, but they are persistent, and they know that as long as you keep feeding the cycle, they will have access. Every time you drink to escape, they're there. Every time you surrender to numbness, they gain ground. They don't need your permission, they just need your unconsciousness. And alcohol, for many, is the key that opens the gate. That's why it's not enough to quit drinking. It's not enough to stop the behavior. You have to reclaim your energy. You have to cleanse the field. Because addiction leaves more than just memories. It leaves impressions, holes, entanglements. Some of these entanglements stretch across lifetimes. They're not new, they're ancient. And they have been waiting for you in every life, hoping you would once again open the door. When a soul dies still attached to addiction, it often remains bound to the lower astral plane, confused, hungry, searching for the feeling it once knew in life. And sometimes, it finds its way to someone who shares the same wound, a vibrational match, and the moment that person lowers their guard, especially through intoxication, the door opens. That soul steps in, not always to possess, sometimes just to share the space. But over time, that presence becomes weight. The cravings intensify, the thoughts darken, the person begins to spiral, and they don't know why. That is the hidden world of spiritual addiction. It's not just what's in the bottle, it's what's riding on the energy of the bottle. And if no one tells you this, you keep trying to fight something that isn't even fully yours. You keep trying to use logic, discipline, and therapy to fight what is, at its root, a spiritual parasite. And that's why so many people relapse. That's why they can't seem to fully sever the tie, because they don't know what they're actually fighting. But once you name it, once you see it for what it is, you take back your power. Light sees through darkness. Awareness dissolves manipulation. When you begin to cleanse not just your habits but your energetic field, everything begins to change. Prayer, meditation, smudging, energy healing, conscious breathwork. These aren't just rituals, they are weapons, shields, tools to reclaim what's been borrowed, broken, or infiltrated. And you don't need to be afraid. These entities feed off fear. They want you to believe you're powerless, that you'll always be stuck, that the urge will never leave. But the truth is, you are not what they tell you. You are not what you've done under their influence. You are not the energy that's been feeding off your pain. You are light, you are infinite, and the moment you remember that, the grip begins to loosen. You might still feel the pull, the echoes, the temptation, but it will feel different, weaker. Not because it disappears overnight, but because you stop confusing the voice of the parasite with the voice of your soul. You begin to reclaim your frequency, and as you do, the entities cannot stay. Their food source, your unconsciousness, begins to dry up. They seek others, they move on, and you begin, for the first time in what feels like lifetimes, to breathe again. This isn't just about addiction, this is about sovereignty, about knowing who you are at the deepest level, about understanding that the spiritual world is not just theory, it's the foundation beneath every decision you make. When you raise your vibration and hold it, no entity can take what you do not offer, no shadow can dwell where light has fully awakened. So if you've struggled, if you've felt haunted, if you've questioned why you do things that make no sense, this is your reminder. You're not crazy, you're not broken, you're in a spiritual battle, but it's one you were born to win, and the moment you stop numbing and start remembering, everything begins to change. There's a moment, often quiet, when the drink is lifted not in celebration, but in resignation. It's not a toast, it's a whisper of surrender. And yet, even in that surrender, there is something deeper happening that most people never see. The liquid may touch the tongue, but it's not the body that is asking for it. It's something older, something hidden beneath layers of identity and experience, something that doesn't quite speak in words but aches in silence. What's being soothed isn't just today's stress or last week's disappointment. Often, what's truly being medicated is an ancient grief, a wound from a lifetime long forgotten, but still felt in the soul. Alcohol, for many, is a lie whispered sweetly in the ear of the wounded. It promises relief, it promises escape, it promises to take away the weight that can't be named. And for a moment, it seems to work. The edges soften, the noise quiets, the ache fades, but only for a while, because alcohol is not a healer, it is a cover. It conceals what the soul needs most to face, and in doing so, it deepens the very wounds it pretends to soothe. There are souls who drink, not because they've had a hard week, but because they've had hard lifetimes. They carry pain that predates this identity. They drink not from this life's trauma, but from memories imprinted in the energetic fabric of their being, memories they can't name, yet still live with. A man may feel a loneliness that has no clear origin. A woman may experience anxiety that doesn't match her circumstances, and in the absence of understanding, alcohol becomes a salve, not because it heals, but because it numbs. And when the pain feels unbearable and invisible, numbing starts to feel like the only way to survive. This is why alcohol so often disguises itself as comfort. It doesn't confront, it conceals. It offers the illusion of control by offering a way to not feel what cannot be explained. and the more the soul has endured, the stronger the appeal becomes. For those who've lived lifetimes filled with betrayal, abandonment, loss, or guilt, the weight can be so immense that even in a new body, in a new name, the ache travels with them. They may not know where it comes from, they just know it's there. Persistent, heavy, silent, and when nothing else seems to quiet it, alcohol steps in like a thief in the night, stealing presence in exchange for momentary peace. But that peace is counterfeit. It is surface-level stillness. Beneath it, the soul stirs. The wounds remain. The unresolved grief does not dissolve, it simply waits. Every drink delays the meeting the soul is destined to have with its own truth, and the longer that truth is delayed, the deeper the wound becomes. What begins as an escape becomes entrapment. What begins as a way to forget becomes the very thing that ensures the pain continues. The tragedy is that many who struggle with alcohol are not broken. They are burdened. They are carrying spiritual injuries that have never been acknowledged. And in a world that rarely speaks of reincarnation or karmic echoes, they're left to believe their suffering began in this life and must be a flaw within themselves. But the truth is more compassionate, 89, and more complex. The soul remembers what the mind forgets. It remembers being abandoned in a distant land, rejected by a tribe, left alone in a time of war, or punished for speaking its truth. It remembers lifetimes of struggle, lifetimes where alcohol was used to dominate or to dull, lifetimes where the only way to survive was to suppress. And so, in this life, when pain arises with no obvious source, the soul reacts with familiarity. It seeks out what once made the pain more bearable. The cycle repeats, not because the soul is weak, but because it is still searching for the moment when it will finally be safe enough to feel. And yet, ironically, every attempt to escape feeling delays the arrival of that safety. There is a bitter paradox here. Alcohol offers to protect the very part of the self that most needs to be revealed. It becomes the shield over the wound that must be seen in order to heal. And so long as it serves that purpose, the true medicine, HES, which is awareness, presence, and love, cannot be administered. You cannot heal what you are unwilling to feel, and you cannot feel what you are constantly trying to escape. This is not to blame those who drink. On the contrary, it is to finally see them with clarity and compassion. To recognize that beneath the addiction is often a deep and noble soul, one who has endured lifetimes of suffering and simply hasn't yet been shown a path to peace that doesn't require sedation. A soul that drinks not to rebel, but to cope, not to indulge but to survive. A soul whose cries have gone unheard for so long that even the silence of intoxication seems preferable to the pain of waiting. But what if there's another way? What if the grief you carry doesn't need to be erased, but embraced? What if, instead of drinking to forget, you dared to remember? Not the events, not the timelines, but the feelings, the echoes, the heaviness. What if, in holding them, you allowed them to rise, not to torment you, but to leave you? Because energy, once acknowledged, begins to move. The soul does not want to stay in pain. It wants to complete its cycle. It wants to release what it no longer needs to carry. But it cannot do that while it's being drowned in numbing agents. The wound cannot close while it is still being denied. There's a reason many experience visions, dreams, or awakenings after choosing sobriety. It is not just the brain healing, it is the soul speaking. Freed from the fog, the soul steps forward with memory, with emotion, with messages long buried, and in those moments, transformation begins, because what you feel can finally be understood, and what is understood can finally be released. The lie of escape is one of the most seductive illusions the human soul will ever face. It is the promise that you can outrun pain. But pain, especially spiritual pain, is not something to escape. It is something to walk through, with courage and sacred intention. And on the other side is not devastation, but liberation. You are not meant to carry this forever. You are not meant to be numb. You are meant to awaken, to feel everything, to remember, not to suffer, but to heal. The wounds you carry are not marks of weakness, they are invitations. Each craving is a call, not to drink, but to listen, to feel, to remember, and ultimately, to be free. The drink may silence the voice for a while, but the soul is patient. It will keep calling, until you turn inward, until you sit in the stillness and say, "I'm ready to hear you now." That is when true healing begins. That is when the lie is seen for what it is. And that is when the escape finally ends, not in a fall, but in a return to truth, a return to self, a return to the soul's original light. There's a cost that isn't seen, a price that doesn't show up in receipts or in jail time or even in broken relationships, not at first. It's the cost that bleeds through dimensions, carrying weight across time. Because when alcohol is abused in one lifetime, it doesn't simply end when the body dies. The pain it caused, the influence it wielded, the destruction it left behind, those echoes travel. They become part of the soul's energetic fingerprint, etched into the vibrational memory of existence. And that memory doesn't forget. You may think of addiction as something personal, something rooted in your own life, your own trauma. But often, what you're feeling is far older than anything that's happened in this lifetime. The craving, the guilt, the magnetism toward that one substance, it can be the inheritance of other selves. Versions of you that once used alcohol not just to escape, but to control, to profit, to dominate. Lifetimes where your relationship with alcohol wasn't about weakness, but power. There are souls walking the earth today who once ran taverns in port cities long ago. Places where weary travelers came to drink, to forget, to lose themselves. And those tavern keepers knew exactly what they were doing. They laced the drinks with substances that would amplify desire, lower inhibition, and keep customers coming back night after night. They profited from brokenness. And when people stumbled home drunk, beat their wives, gambled away their earnings, or ended their lives in drunken rages, the tavern keeper turned a blind eye, counting coins instead of consequences. In another life, that soul may have been a warlord, one who used alcohol as a tool of manipulation, elevaima, getting his soldiers drunk before battles, so their fear would be dulled, so they would kill without hesitation. In the name of victory, in the name of conquest, he celebrated with endless barrels of wine while villages burned, families wept, and children starved. The blood was spilled not just by the blade, but by the bottle. The substance became a weapon, and the soul that wielded it didn't realize the bill would come due in another incarnation. And then there were those who posed as healers, shamans, priests, seers. They offered sacred drinks, promising visions, enlightenment, healing, but their motives weren't pure. They used alcohol and other mixtures to control their followers, to create dependency, to seduce, to take. Under the guise of spiritual authority, they led people into altered states, only to implant beliefs, exploit vulnerability, or drain energy for their own gain. They called it ritual, but it was exploitation. And the energy of those actions became a stain on the soul, following it through the corridors of time. When you hurt someone under the influence of alcohol, it leaves a scar. But when you lead others into that same influence, when you profit from their fall, it creates something deeper, a karmic knot. One that tightens with every repetition. You don't always see it immediately, because karma is patient. It waits. Sometimes for years, sometimes for lifetimes, but eventually, it returns, not as punishment, but as balance. And that's what happens when these souls return. They are born into lives where alcohol finds them again, not as power this time, but as pain. They are born with a strange pull toward it. They find themselves addicted faster than others. They fall harder, they lose more, and they wonder why. But if they could look back, truly look back, they would see a pattern. A trail of moments where their choices led others to suffer, not just once, but over and over again, not just in one life but in many. This is not about shame, this is not about judgment, this is about understanding how energy works. When you participate in the suffering of others, even unknowingly, that energy does not vanish. It returns to you in a form that allows you to feel what they felt, so that your soul can evolve, so that your consciousness can awaken. so that you can make a different choice. Think of it like spiritual debt. Every act of harm adds weight, and that weight doesn't disappear when your heart stops beating. It comes with you, not to trap you, but to teach you. And when that debt isn't paid through awareness, it continues to collect interest. What began as a few careless acts becomes a repeating cycle of addiction, abuse, self-hatred. And the soul, trapped in confusion, doesn't understand why it keeps happening, until it does. Sometimes that moment of realization comes in a hospital bed, alone, with nothing left. Sometimes it comes after the 50th relapse, the loss of another relationship, another job, another piece of dignity. But when the soul finally pauses and asks, "Where does this really come from?" that's when the cycle starts to shift, because awareness breaks karma faster than any punishment. The moment you see the pattern clearly, you begin to rewrite it. And it's not just about your own pain. That's what makes this so hard to grasp. Some of the karmic weight you carry might have nothing to do with what's happened to you. It might come from what you did to others. And in this life, you're being given a chance to feel that, to understand it, to walk through it with open eyes and an open heart. Not because the universe wants you to suffer, but because your soul wants to grow. Growth doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from facing it, feeling it, owning it, not as a victim, but as a creator. You created ripples in other lives. Now those ripples have come back to your shore. What will you do with them? Will you drown in them, or will you learn to walk on water? Every soul that has used alcohol as a tool of harm, knowingly or not, must eventually face what was created. And that facing often looks like addiction, like compulsion, like darkness that seems to have no origin. But once you understand the source, you're no longer at its mercy. You can choose differently. You can begin to live in a way that heals the damage, restores the balance, and lifts the burden. That's why some of the greatest healers in this world are former addicts, because their suffering wasn't just about their own karma. It was about clearing the damage done to others. And through their recovery, through their service, through their willingness to share and teach and guide, they begin to pay back the debt, not out of guilt, but out of love. Karmic debt doesn't ask for perfection. It asks for participation. It asks for honesty. It asks for courage. You don't have to fix it all in one life, but you do have to face it. You do have to stop pretending the pain is meaningless, because it isn't. It's a message from the past, and you are the only one who can translate it. So if you feel like you've lived with a weight you can't explain, if alcohol has played a role in your downfall and you don't know why it has so much power over you, ask yourself, what if this isn't just about now? What if this is about then? What if this is your chance to break a pattern that has lived through centuries, not just for you, but for every soul you've touched, every life you've crossed, every chain that still rattles behind you? You're not being punished. You're being given the chance to restore something ancient, and that is sacred. It often doesn't look like a revelation. In fact, the turning point usually arrives in silence, not with thunder or fire, but with a stillness that emerges after everything else has crumbled. There's no applause, no divine voice from the sky, no bright sign flashing, "Now you're free." Instead, there's just a pause, a breath, a moment where something deep inside you, the part of you that's always known the truth, whispers that you can't keep going the way you've been going, not because you're weak, but because your soul is tired of pretending this is who you are. This moment doesn't always happen on a mountaintop. More often than not, it happens on a bathroom floor, in the aftermath of another mistake, in the echo of another broken promise, in the wreckage of a relationship destroyed or the cold silence of a night spent alone, drowning in shame. It happens in hospitals, in jails, in cars parked in dark lots while tears soak into steering wheels. It happens in the quiet moments when the mask slips and you're left with nothing but yourself. And somehow, that's enough. You may not even realize it's a turning point when it's happening. It can feel like defeat, like finality. But what's actually ending is not your hope, it's your illusion. The illusion that you could keep numbing it, outrunning it, or pretending it wasn't as deep as it really is. The truth is that the soul has been trying to reach you for years. But the noise of addiction, of survival, of self-hate, has been drowning it out. And in the ashes of your collapse, when there's nothing left to cling to, the soul sees its chance to speak. It's in these moments of deep despair that the soul often finds its opening. The ego collapses under the weight of its own lies. The armor you've been wearing shatters because it was never real protection. When here, it was only hiding you from the pain that needed to be faced. When the drink no longer gives relief, when the escape no longer works, when you realize you've been circling the same hell for years, that's when the soul steps forward and says, "Enough." Not with judgment, but with love. You see, spiritual awakening doesn't begin in perfection. It doesn't begin when you've figured it all out or mastered yourself. It begins in the rubble, in the smoldering remains of who you thought you were. It begins when you stop trying to look good and start trying to be real. It begins when you finally admit that you need something greater than yourself to carry you out of the pit you've fallen into. And in that humility, in that raw honesty, something beautiful is born. Many people think spiritual awakening is about rising, but often, the first step is falling. The fall strips away the stories, the identities, the excuses. It shows you the parts of yourself you've hidden even from your own awareness. And while that can feel terrifying, it is also liberating. Because once everything false has burned, only truth remains. And that truth, however small or fragile it may feel, is the seed of your return. There is a sacredness to the moment you choose life again. It may not feel like a miracle, but it is. To wake up after years of numbness, to look in the mirror and say, "I don't want to be this anymore," to reach for help, to breathe through the shame and try again, that is resurrection, that is the soul reclaiming its path. And no matter how many times you've fallen, this moment matters, because this time, it's real. This time, it's not a promise made in fear, but a choice made in truth. The addiction that once seemed to own you becomes the very thing that led you back to yourself. That's the paradox most never see. The vice you thought would destroy you becomes the gateway to your deepest healing. Because in your attempt to escape your pain, you found the very thing that forced you to confront it. And in confronting it, you uncovered your strength. You discovered your capacity for forgiveness, for resilience, for light. Some souls cannot awaken without walking through darkness. It is part of their contract. They choose to descend, not because they are flawed, but because their light is forged in fire. You may have chosen addiction as your crucible, the arena in which you would forget everything in order to remember what cannot be forgotten, who you really are. You are not the compulsion. You are not the shame. You are not the voice that tells you you'll never change. You are the one hearing that voice. And the moment you realize that, you begin to separate from it. The turning point doesn't promise instant transformation. It is not a magic spell, but it is a portal. It is the line in the sand where your soul says, "From this point forward, I choose healing." You may still stumble, you may still fall, but your direction has shifted. You are no longer spiraling downward, you are climbing upward, even if on your hands and knees. The difference is not in your perfection, the difference is in your choice. Some days, the progress will feel invisible, but the soul sees it. Every moment you resist the urge, every breath you take instead of a drink, every time you sit with your pain instead of running from it. That is sacred, that is holy. The world may not understand what you're doing, but the soul knows, and it rejoices, because every act of healing, no matter how small, ripples across lifetimes. You may find, as you walk this new path, that the addiction becomes a teacher. It shows you where you abandoned yourself. It reveals the places where love was missing, where grief was ignored, where truth was silenced. And by facing it, by healing it, you become someone who can hold space for others who are still lost in the dark. Your pain becomes medicine, your story becomes a map. The turning point is not about becoming someone new. It is about remembering who you were before the pain took over, before the wounds rewrote your sense of worth, before the soul's voice was drowned out by the noise of the world. And when you remember, even for a moment, everything changes, because the light you are returning to isn't outside of you. It's been within you the entire time. This is not just about addiction. This is about the soul's longing to come home. And when that longing becomes stronger than the craving, the healing begins. When the desire to feel becomes stronger than the desire to forget, the soul reclaims its place at the center of your life. And even if no one else sees it, you will know something has shifted. The darkness has not won. The light is rising. You are not lost. You are returning, not to the person you were before the addiction, but to the soul you've always been beneath it. The journey is long, but the turning point is sacred. And once you've crossed it, the path may not be easy, but it is real. And that, more than anything, is what your soul has been waiting for. Not perfection, just presence, just honesty, just the moment you say, "I'm ready to come home." Redemption doesn't come in the way most people expect. It's not always a dramatic awakening or a miraculous overnight transformation. Sometimes, redemption is quiet. It begins in the smallest choices, the ones no one else sees. It might start with a whispered apology, a moment of stillness before the urge to relapse, a single honest conversation. But if there is one path that has always led the soul back into alignment, it is service, especially when the service is rooted in the very pain the soul once caused. You've heard the phrase, wounded healer. But have you ever considered why the wound exists in the first place? It's not just random suffering. The wound is the place where your karma burns brightest. And in healing others who are bleeding from the same place, you begin to stitch shut, not just their wounds, but your own. That's the power of service. It's not about being perfect, it's about being willing to stand in the fire with someone else, because you've walked through it yourself. When you've caused harm through addiction, unity, in this life, or in lives long past, there's a part of your soul that yearns to make it right, even if you can't name it, even if you don't remember. That yearning is your compass. It pulls you toward moments where you can offer your experience as medicine. And every time you do, something in you becomes lighter, because every act of love aimed at the wound you once inflicted is a step toward balance, toward freedom. Helping someone else through addiction is not just kindness, it is a sacred act, a soul-level recalibration. It tells the universe, I see the harm, I understand the weight, and I'm choosing now to be part of the healing. You don't have to shout it, you don't need recognition. Karma doesn't care about applause, it listens only to your energy, your sincerity, your intention. And when that intention is clean, when your service comes from the heart, it begins to dissolve the layers of past transgression like smoke in sunlight. There was a soul who once lived a life marked by destruction, a life where alcohol wasn't just an escape, it was a weapon. In that incarnation, he used his influence to lead others into addiction. Not out of hatred, but out of greed. He made a fortune selling spirits to broken communities, knowing the damage it caused, but turning away from the wreckage. He told himself it wasn't his fault, that people chose their path. But deep down, he knew better. He could feel it in the way their eyes changed, in the way families shattered, in the way the light dimmed in those who drank what he offered. When that life ended, he returned to the spirit world, burdened with grief. He saw clearly what he had done, not because he was judged, but because his own soul couldn't look away anymore. The pain he had distanced himself from was now part of his own vibration, and he asked for a chance to heal it, to make it right, not through suffering, but through service. So he returned, reborn into a body that would one day fall into addiction, not as a punishment, but as a mirror. He would become the one he once exploited. He would feel the weight of dependency, the shame, the hopelessness, and in time, he would find his way out, and when he did, he would be given an opportunity to reach back, to extend a hand, to lift others from the same pit he had once helped dig. And that's exactly what he did. In this life, he became a man who struggled deeply with alcohol. He lost years to the bottle, lost love, health, purpose. There were moments when he didn't think he'd survive, but something within him refused to give up. It wasn't just willpower, it was a memory, not of the suffering, but of the responsibility. His soul remembered why this was happening, even if his conscious mind didn't. After years of struggle, he found sobriety, but more importantly, he found service. He began working with others who were in the grip of addiction. Not as a preacher, not as a savior, but as a fellow traveler. He sat with them in their pain, He listened without judgment. He shared his own story, not to impress, but to connect. And one by one, those he helped began to rise. Not all of them, but many. And every soul he touched with compassion became part of his healing. He didn't know it at the time, but with every meeting, every sleepless night spent talking someone off the ledge, every act of understanding, he was clearing the weight of another lifetime. The harm he once caused was being rewritten by the love he now gave. That's how karma works. It's not fixed, it's fluid, and when the energy of harm is met with the energy of service, something extraordinary happens. It begins to neutralize. The universe is not cruel, it is precise. It remembers what we forget, and it offers us, again and again, the chance to restore what we once broke. Sometimes through apology, sometimes through sacrifice, but most powerfully, through love. You don't need to be healed to help others. You just need to be honest, to be willing. Because in the process of helping someone else climb, you'll realize that your hands were never truly empty. You had strength you didn't know, wisdom you didn't expect. And that wisdom didn't come from perfection. It came from pain transformed into purpose. If you've walked the path of addiction, if you've hurt others or yourself through the choices you made while under the influence, know this: your redemption does not depend on who forgives you. It depends on what you choose now. Are you willing to turn that pain into service? Are you willing to offer your experience as a light for others still lost in the dark? Because the moment you do, the scales begin to shift. Not only in this life, but across every lifetime where the damage was done. The ripple effect of your service touches not just the present, but the past. And those you once harmed, in this life or another, feel the energy of your sincerity. Your transformation becomes theirs, and slowly, what was once a legacy of pain becomes a legacy of healing. That is the great secret of karma, ISC. It is not here to punish you, it is here to evolve you. And when you rise above the pattern and use your story to guide others, you are not only saving them, you are saving yourself. This is why the souls who have suffered the most often carry the most light, because their service was forged in the fire of experience, and that light, once ignited, can never be taken back. Redemption is real. It begins the moment you decide to make your healing someone else's hope. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood forces in the spiritual universe. It's often seen as a passive act, something you do to let others off the hook. But in truth, forgiveness is not about them. It's about you. It's about the soul laying down its weapons, untying its own chains and saying, "I will not carry this burden anymore." When you forgive, you do not erase the past. You release your identity from it. You let go of the version of yourself that was shaped by pain, resentment, or guilt. And in doing so, you open a path toward real liberation. For many who struggle with addiction, forgiveness is the missing piece. Not the easy kind of forgiveness, a DSD2, not the words you say just to move on, but the deep, soul-level surrender that says, even though I do not forget, I choose not to be ruled by this anymore. It's a choice to no longer define yourself by your lowest moments or your deepest betrayals. Without forgiveness, the soul becomes a vault of unresolved emotion. It stores everything, every judgment, every hurt, every regret, and those energies weigh heavily, echoing across lifetimes. Alcohol, in many cases, becomes a false way to silence those echoes. Some souls drink because they can't forgive others. The betrayal still burns. The abandonment still stings. The cruelty they endured still haunts them. And since the pain has no clear outlet, they turn to substances to blur the edges. The alcohol becomes a numbing agent, not just for current wounds, but for ancient ones. Wounds that stretch back through generations and lifetimes. Wounds they no longer remember in detail, but still feel in their bones. The rage has fermented into sorrow, and the sorrow has hardened into self-protection. Forgiveness, then, becomes not just a nice idea, it becomes the only key that unlocks the door back to peace. Others drink because they can't forgive themselves. Maybe it's something they did in this life. Maybe it's something from another time. But the shame is so thick, so suffocating, that the soul begins to believe it is unworthy of healing. That redemption is for others, not for them. So they drink to silence the guilt. To quiet the internal courtroom that never stops judging, they punish themselves through destruction, convinced they deserve the pain. And that is where addiction sinks its roots deepest, in the soil of self-loathing. But here is what the soul knows, even when the mind forgets. No matter what you've done, no matter how far you've fallen, you are not your mistakes. You are not your addiction. You are the presence that witnessed those moments. You are the awareness that still longs for light. And as long as that longing exists, healing is not only possible, it is inevitable. Because the moment you begin to forgive yourself, even a little, the karmic knots begin to unravel. Forgiveness loosens what resentment tightens. Every grudge you hold binds you to the past. Every unhealed memory creates a loop, and karma thrives in loops. It repeats until it's seen, felt, acknowledged, and finally released. But forgiveness is the scalpel that cuts through the repetition. It says, "This pain does not define me. This history is not my destiny." And in that moment, the soul is no longer reacting from its wounds. It is choosing from its truth. Many karmic bonds are not held in place by what happened, but by the refusal to let it go. You may have been wronged in another life. You may have inflicted harm in one. But those events are not chains, unless you keep holding them. The pain continues not because of the act itself, but because of the energy you continue to feed it with. And forgiveness is the conscious choice to stop feeding it. Not because it wasn't real, not because it wasn't harmful, but because your freedom matters more than your pain. Imagine two souls bound together through centuries by a single act of betrayal. One betrayed, one hurt. Over and over, they reincarnate into roles that mirror the wound: parent and child, lover and betrayer, addict and enabler. Their souls keep dancing the same painful waltz until one of them decides to forgive. In that moment, the cycle shatters, the contract dissolves, the energy clears. Not through confrontation, not through revenge, but through compassion. That is the power of forgiveness. It is not passive, it is alchemical. For the alcoholic, this becomes even more essential. Because alcohol clouds judgment, yes, but more importantly, it clouds memory, not just of events, but of the soul's essence. The drink becomes a way to forget who you really are, and when you forget your own divinity, forgiveness becomes impossible. You see yourself only through the lens of damage. But the moment you begin to remember your worth, the moment you begin to treat yourself with compassion, forgiveness rises like breath after drowning, and in that breath, the healing begins. Forgiveness is not about excusing what happened, it's about choosing peace over punishment. It's about saying, "I will not be at war with myself anymore," because every time you refuse to forgive, you become your own jailer, and alcohol becomes the guard. The drink is not the problem, it's the symptom. The real prison is unprocessed pain, and the only way out is through the doorway of the heart, through radical honesty, through tears that have waited lifetimes to fall, through apologies whispered into the silence of your own spirit. You don't need anyone else's permission to forgive. You don't need them to apologize first. You don't need to understand every detail of what went wrong. You simply need to want freedom more than you want to be right. And that is what turns the key. That is what begins to change the frequency of your field. When you forgive, truly forgive, you shift dimensions. You step out of the vibration of victimhood and into the vibration of liberation. And the soul feels it instantly. You may not see the changes right away, but your energy knows. Old triggers start to fade. Old cravings lose their grip. The mirror becomes a little less cruel. You breathe deeper. You dream more clearly. You begin to feel not just the pain, but the potential. You begin to see the path ahead, not as punishment, but as possibility. Because the act of forgiveness opens the door to a future that is no longer haunted by the past. This is what the soul came here for. Not to suffer, but to transmute suffering into wisdom. Not to repeat karma, but to complete it. And forgiveness is the sacred mechanism through which that completion occurs. Without it, you circle endlessly. With it, you evolve. So whether you are the one who drank, or the one who was hurt by someone who did, Ask yourself this: are you ready to be free? Not free from memory, but free from bondage, free from blame, free from bitterness. Because that freedom does not begin in the world, it begins in you. And the moment you say yes to forgiveness, for them, for yourself, for everything, is the moment the chains begin to break. Not because someone set you free, but because you remembered that you always had the key. There's a truth so deep, so hidden beneath the layers of suffering, that most people never consider it, and yet it changes everything the moment you understand it. The truth is this: not all pain is punishment. Not all suffering is something that was done to you. Some of it, perhaps the most soul-shaping parts of it, were chosen, not by accident, not out of recklessness, but from a place of wisdom, from a place of love. Before you entered this life, before your body formed, and before your name was spoken into the world, your soul already knew what it came here to do. It chose the blueprint, the family, the patterns, even the pain. Not because it wanted to suffer, but because it saw something that needed to be healed, a chain that needed to be broken, a lesson that had been left unfinished across generations, or even across lifetimes. You didn't come here blind, you came here brave. There are souls who choose the path of addiction, not because they are weak, but because their soul knows that by walking through that fire, they will awaken something ancient. They will trigger healing not just for themselves, but for those around them. Sometimes, it's not just about your own evolution, it's about the ripple you create in the lives of others. Your fall becomes their awakening. Your struggle becomes their mirror. Your rise becomes their permission. Imagine a soul who volunteers to incarnate into a family riddled with alcoholism, a lineage haunted by the same wound, repeating itself generation after generation. The grandfather who drank himself into rage, the mother who numbed her grief with wine, the siblings who spiraled into silence or rebellion, and then there is you, the one who feels the weight of it all, even as a child. The one who sees the pattern and doesn't know why it hurts so much, only that it does. And underneath that pain, there is a quiet knowing: this must stop. It cannot go on like this. That knowing isn't random, it's sacred. It's the voice of your soul, remembering the agreement it made long before birth, to be the one who turns toward the wound, instead of away, to face what others denied, to feel what others numbed, to break the cycle not through blame, but through healing. This is what it means to carry a soul contract. A sacred assignment that we accept not because it is easy, but because we know that real change doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from transforming it. The path of addiction is one of the hardest paths a soul can walk. It strips you of illusion. It brings you face to face with your shadow. And if you choose to rise, you rise not just for yourself, but for everyone who came before you, and everyone who will come after. That's why the struggle feels so heavy, because it's not just yours. It's ancestral, it's karmic, it's collective. But here's what most don't realize. When you walk this path with awareness, you become the medicine. Every time you choose to stay sober, to be present, to speak your truth instead of hiding, you are healing the past. You are rewriting the future. You are changing what runs in the bloodline, not just through DNA, but through energy, through choice, through consciousness. There are families where addiction has been passed down like a silent inheritance, and in each generation, someone begins to feel the weight more intensely than the others. That person is often labeled sensitive, troubled, or lost. But spiritually, they are the chosen one, the one whose soul volunteered to carry the pain so it would no longer need to be passed on, and that person might be you. You may have looked at your life and wondered why it's been so hard, why you feel things so deeply, why you struggle with a substance that others seem to walk away from easily. And the answer may not be in your past, but in your soul's promise, a promise to bring the darkness to light, to turn inherited pain into living wisdom, to transmute what was once destructive into something sacred. That's the paradox of addiction. It can destroy, but in the hands of an awakened soul, it can also transform, because the deeper the fall, the more powerful the rise. The soul that chooses this path has the capacity to alchemize poison into medicine, not by bypassing the pain, but by honoring it, by walking through it with eyes open, heart open, willing to learn, willing to teach. And what you may not realize is that others are watching, not just with their eyes, but with their energy. Every time you choose to heal instead of escape, you shift the vibration of the people around you. Even if they don't say it, even if they're still stuck, your healing gives their soul permission to believe something else is possible. That's why some souls choose this struggle, because they know that through it, others will awaken. Your suffering isn't meaningless. It's not wasted. Every time you cry out in the middle of the night, every time you resist the craving, every time you pick yourself back up after a relapse, the universe sees it. Your ancestors feel it. Your future lineage is shaped by it. You may never fully understand the depth of your impact, but you are changing timelines just by staying the course. This is what sacred struggle looks like. It's not glamorous, it's raw, it's messy, but it is holy, because it is chosen. And in that choice, you hold more power than you know. You can end what others couldn't. You can rewrite the story. You can be the turning point in a lineage that has known only pain. That is no small thing. That is the work of a spiritual warrior. And maybe no one told you this before. Maybe they made you believe that your addiction was a shameful secret, something to hide, something that made you less. But the truth is, the moment you start walking the path of healing, you become more. Not in the eyes of the world, perhaps, but in the eyes of your soul. You become the one who said yes to the fire, the one who chose to feel the pain others buried, the one who carried the torch through the darkest night and emerged with the ability to light the way for others. You don't have to carry it all alone. You're not meant to. Even the strongest souls need support, need reminders, need love, and as you heal, you'll attract others who are ready to do the same. You'll form connections that are deeper than blood, soul family, those who recognize your journey because they've walked it too. Together, you begin to weave a new story, one built on truth, compassion, and transformation. The soul doesn't choose struggle for punishment, it chooses struggle for evolution, for expansion, for remembrance. And when you embrace that, when you stop asking why me, and start asking what now, you step into your power. You may be the ancestor who breaks the cycle, the one your lineage has been waiting for, the one who came not to run from the pain, but to end it. And in doing so, you don't just heal yourself, you heal all who came before, and all who are still to come. There comes a point on the path when knowing is no longer enough. Understanding the karmic roots of addiction, seeing the patterns, acknowledging the wounds, all of that is crucial. But awareness alone does not dissolve karma. Healing requires action, it requires sacred effort, a willing participation in your own liberation. The soul, while eternal, is also deeply practical. It doesn't just seek truth, it seeks transformation, and transformation, especially when it comes to addiction, must be lived out through intentional spiritual practice. These practices are not punishments or rituals to please some distant god, they are bridges, tools for helping the soul shift from entanglement to freedom. One of the most powerful tools in this journey is prayer, not the kind that begs or pleads, but the kind that aligns. True prayer is a conversation between your human self and your divine nature. It's not about reciting perfect words, it's about bringing your heart into coherence with your soul. When you pray with honesty, with vulnerability, you open a spiritual channel through which energy begins to move. You begin to shift the frequency of your being. You begin to release what was never yours to carry. And when that happens, karma loosens its grip. The patterns that once pulled you toward the drink, toward the self-sabotage, begin to dissolve in the presence of that higher vibration. There are prayers for strength, prayers for clarity, prayers for forgiveness. But sometimes, the most powerful prayer is simply, "Help me remember who I am." That is the essence of healing addiction. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering the purity you forgot, the light you covered, the soul you abandoned when the pain became too loud. And in that remembrance, healing becomes possible. Prayer realigns the soul with its original intention. It draws divine intelligence into the moment. It doesn't erase karma. it gives you the strength to transform it. Another ancient tool of liberation is fasting. Not just from food, but from anything that numbs or distracts. Fasting is an act of conscious detachment. It says, I choose to feel what I've been avoiding, and in that choice, you become more sensitive, more aware, more attuned to the subtleties of your inner world. For those struggling with addiction, fasting becomes a sacred way to cleanse the energetic body, to reset the nervous system, to silence the cravings long enough to hear what's really underneath them. Fasting isn't about deprivation, it's about devotion. You are not punishing the body, you are inviting the soul to take the lead. Even a day without stimulation, a few hours in stillness, a deliberate pause from indulgence, not vows, these can begin to crack the shell that addiction has built around your spirit. When you fast, the noise lowers, the veils thin, and you may begin to feel the presence of emotions, memories, and energies that have long been suppressed. This is where the real work begins, sitting with what arises, not fixing it, not running from it, but being with it as if it were a sacred teacher, because it is. Alongside prayer and fasting, there is the practice of light work. This is not fantasy, this is energy science. You are made of light, not metaphorically, but literally. Your body is an electromagnetic field, and it responds to intention, frequency, and visualization. Light work is the conscious use of energy to restore coherence to the spiritual body. It can be as simple as visualizing a golden light pouring into your crown, or as complex as using sacred geometry to clear blockages. But at its core, light work is the act of calling divine intelligence into your body to reorganize what has been distorted. When addiction has tangled the soul in darkness, light work becomes an essential practice. Not because it fixes everything instantly, but because it slowly re-educates your system to remember purity. You begin to rewire yourself through light. You become a channel, and with each session, whether guided or spontaneous, the heaviness starts to lift, the cords begin to loosen, you start to feel the truth of who you are not as an idea, but as a vibration. Energy healing works in a similar way. Through hands-on methods like Reiki or distant healing through sound, breath, or intention, you allow someone trained in frequency work to help clear the blocks in your field. Many people with addiction carry dense, stagnant energy around the solar plexus, the heart, the throat. These areas become numb, congested, or even closed off entirely. Through gentle, intuitive healing, that energy can begin to move again. Tears may come, old emotions may surface, and that is the gift, because when the energy begins to flow, the karma begins to release. But you don't always need a healer to experience energetic cleansing. You can begin on your own, through visualization. Visualization is a sacred technology. The mind cannot distinguish between what is imagined and what is experienced energetically. So when you visualize healing, your energy field responds. One powerful practice is to sit in stillness and imagine every karmic tie to addiction as a thread wrapped around your body. Some are thin, others thick, some feel warm, others cold. See them clearly. Then, in your mind's eye, begin to cut them, one by one, with a sword of light. This is not a performance. This is spiritual surgery. With every thread you cut, say something like, I release this contract. I reclaim my sovereignty. I am no longer bound. As you do, imagine golden light filling the spaces where those threads once clung. This is how you reprogram your field, not through force, but through sacred intention. You can also use visualization to call upon spiritual allies, icons, guides, ancestors, angels, and ask them to assist in clearing your field. Imagine them surrounding you, placing their hands upon your body, drawing out the toxins not just from your blood, but from your soul. See the darkness lifting, the heaviness dissolving. Feel your light returning. This is not fantasy, this is remembrance. You are remembering what it feels like to be whole, and the more you do it, the more your body begins to believe it. There is also the simple, profound practice of speaking healing words aloud. The vibration of your voice carries power. Affirmations are not wishful thinking, they are energetic commands. Say things like, I am free, I forgive myself completely, I release the pain of this and every lifetime. I choose the light. Say them with conviction, with heart. Repeat them until they sink in, until they start to feel more real than the craving, more real than the guilt, and eventually, they will. No one practice is enough on its own. The path is not linear, it is layered. You may pray one day, fast the next, fall apart the day after, then rise again in silence. That is all part of the process. Spiritual disciplines are not about control, they are about communion. Communion with your essence, communion with the divine. And through that communion, the chains of addiction, forged through lifetimes of pain and unconsciousness, begin to dissolve. Breaking the spiritual chain is not a single act, it is a series of sacred choices. Moment by moment, breath by breath, you return to yourself. You rewire your soul through presence, intention, and light. You stop running from the past and begin walking toward your future. Not the future written by karma, but the one rewritten by grace. You are not bound by who you've been. You are not destined to repeat what has already passed. The chain can be broken. The cycle can end. And it begins not in some distant place, but here, now, with your next sacred choice. There comes a moment in the journey when the weight lifts. It doesn't always happen in some dramatic revelation, nor is it marked by fanfare or flashing signs from the universe. Sometimes it arrives in silence, in a morning where the urge that once screamed is now just a whisper, in a night where your thoughts are your own, unclouded and still. The vice no longer speaks for you, the loop is no longer spinning, something old has broken, something new has awakened. When the karma is finally cleared, you feel it in your bones. It's not a concept anymore, it's a lived truth. The pain that once seemed to follow you from lifetime to lifetime no longer calls you back. The chains have been dissolved not through resistance, but through understanding, through honesty, through 1,000 small choices that aligned you with a higher frequency. And when that energy shifts, the soul steps into a realm it may not have known in centuries. Freedom. This freedom is unlike anything you've ever experienced. It's not just the absence of addiction, it's the return of full sovereignty, the full remembrance of who you are without the interference of karmic patterns, unconscious loops, or the parasitic energies that once found a home in your shadow. For the first time in many lives, you stand clear, and in that clarity, the path ahead opens with light. In the higher dimensions of the soul's journey, once a karmic cycle has been completed, new options begin to emerge. Where once your incarnations were magnetized by the unresolved, none drawn into families, situations, and circumstances that would trigger your lessons, now the soul is free to choose. Not from obligation, but from inspiration. Not from guilt, but from vision. You may choose to come back in a body that is untouched by addiction. You may choose to enter a lineage that is already healing, already awake, or you may not return at all, at least not in the way you once did. When the spiritual residue of the vice is gone, the soul doesn't have to revisit the same pain. The pull is no longer magnetic, the wound no longer whispers, and in that silence, you begin to hear something else, your own divine will. That's the beauty of karma when it is resolved. It no longer dictates, it liberates. It becomes wisdom instead of weight. And that wisdom begins to radiate outward into everything you touch. You're no longer walking through life trying to fix what was broken. You're creating new experiences, new timelines, from a space of wholeness. This is the reward for the soul who has endured the fire and chosen to rise. You may find yourself, in some future life, drawn to teaching, to healing, to creative expression that uplifts. You may be born with a calm mind, an open heart, and a body that no longer carries cravings for substances that disconnect. Instead, your body may become a vessel for energy work, sound healing, movement, or sacred touch. Your voice may carry the resonance of truth, of compassion, because you've lived the journey of suffering and chosen redemption. Some souls, once free from the karmic entanglement of addiction, choose to return as guides for others. They come, not to suffer again, but to assist those who are still walking the path. They may be born as children who, from a young age, speak with wisdom beyond their years, or as adults who instinctively understand what others are going through, even without having lived it in this lifetime. That understanding comes from memory, the memory of having overcome what once seemed impossible. And sometimes, these souls choose to remain in the higher planes for a time, serving as spiritual guides for those still on earth, whispering inspiration into the dreams of the struggling, sending waves of compassion to those on the edge, guiding the hands of healers, the words of counselors, the decisions of family members. Even from beyond the veil, they continue their service, not out of duty, but from a deep desire to see others freed. This is the ripple of redemption. It doesn't end with you, it extends beyond you. Every layer of healing you achieve becomes part of the collective frequency of liberation. Others begin to rise, not even knowing that your energy helped make it possible. This is how light moves, not always loudly, but always with purpose. And make no mistake, redemption is not only possible, it is already waiting. The future you, the healed you, the sovereign soul beyond the struggle, already exists in potential. Every time you choose awareness over impulse, truth over denial, compassion over judgment, you're drawing closer to that version of yourself. You're collapsing timelines that no longer serve you. You're aligning with the path that leads you home. This is why you didn't give up. Why something in you, no matter how low it got, kept reaching for the light. Because your soul knew what was waiting. It saw the vision, the life beyond the vice, the incarnation where peace is natural, where purpose flows like breath, where love is not something you chase but something you are. That life is not a fantasy. It is the reward for your courage, and it begins the moment you realize you were never here to be broken. You were here to become whole. And now, with the karmic cords dissolved and the lessons integrated, you are no longer ruled by invisible compulsions. The cravings that once defined your days become distant echoes. The memories of your past no longer carry shame, they carry strength. You can look back at your journey with compassion, knowing that every fall brought you closer to this moment, to the version of you that walks in light, that chooses from truth, that lives with clarity. You begin to embody the quiet power of someone who knows their worth. You become a safe space for others, a lighthouse in the storm. Not because you are flawless, but because you are real. Because you have walked through darkness and chosen not just to survive, but to transform. That transformation is your offering to the world. A living testimony that the past does not define you, that the soul, no matter how far it strays, always has a path back to truth. And so you walk forward, lighter, freer, aligned. No longer driven by karma, but guided by spirit. No longer haunted by the past, but lit by the future. No longer lost in the vice, but anchored in the vision. This is the light beyond the vice, and it is yours. You may not see it now, but the very fact that you're here, listening, breathing, reaching for something beyond the pain, that is proof of your power. Because broken things don't seek light. They collapse inward, they disappear. But you, even in your darkest moments, have never stopped searching, even when the weight felt unbearable, even when the shame wrapped around you like a second skin. Somewhere deep inside your soul kept whispering, "This is not the end, this is not who you really are." And that whisper, quiet as it may have been, was the beginning of your return. You are not broken. You are awakening. You are not lost. You are remembering. And even if the world hasn't seen your progress, even if you still wake up some days questioning your worth, the truth remains unchanged. You are a divine being, temporarily cloaked in confusion, learning how to come home to yourself. The addiction is not your identity. It's not a moral failure. It's not a life sentence. It is the smoke rising from a fire that has burned across lifetimes, a signal that your soul has unfinished business with pain, with guilt, with memory. But the fire can be extinguished, not by force, not by shame, but by presence, by truth, by love. The past may have shaped you, but it does not define you. You are not the child who was abandoned. You are not the adult who kept falling. You are not the mistakes you made when you couldn't see clearly. Those were moments, hard moments, human moments. But they are not the whole story. The whole story is this: you came into this world carrying both wounds and wisdom. And even though the wounds tried to dominate the narrative, your wisdom never disappeared. It has always been there, waiting for the day you would believe in it again. Healing is not something outside of you. It's not a prize for the perfect or a gift for the chosen. Healing is who you are. It lives in your breath, in your tears, in your decision to try again when every part of you wants to give up. Healing is not a destination, it's a becoming, a remembering of the light that lives beneath the scar tissue. A restoration of the voice you silenced when survival became your only goal, and with every act of self-kindness, with every time you choose truth over escape, that light grows stronger. You are the healing, not just for yourself, but for those who came before you, and those who will come after. The work you do in this life ripples through the timelines. When you choose sobriety, when you choose compassion, when you choose to forgive yourself, you are healing more than just this moment. You are healing ancestral wounds, karmic imprints, soul-level contracts that have waited lifetimes for resolution. Every time you speak a truth that was silenced in a past life, you change the energetic pattern. Every time you choose to love the parts of yourself that were once discarded, you send healing backwards and forwards across generations. You are not just one person. You are the convergence of countless lives, countless choices, countless dreams. And now, in this lifetime, you have chosen to be the one who breaks the cycle. The one who says, "It ends with me." That is not a burden, that is an honor. And even if it feels heavy, even if the road ahead feels long, know this: you are not walking it alone. There are unseen hands guiding you, there are ancestors cheering for you, there are future generations silently thanking you for doing the work they won't have to. You are the healing in human form. Every breath you take is a declaration that you are still here, still becoming, still willing to try. And that willingness, that choice to keep showing up for yourself, is the most sacred act you can perform. Because it tells the universe, I believe in my own redemption. I believe in my own light. And when you believe it, the universe begins to conspire in your favor. Signs show up. Synchronicities unfold. People arrive. Because the world rearranges itself around a soul that chooses to remember its worth. Do not wait to be perfect before you begin. Do not wait to be free of cravings, free of doubt, free of grief. Begin now. Begin exactly as you are. The healing is not at the end of the path, it is the path. Every choice you make to treat yourself with more honesty, more tenderness, more courage, NDA, that is the healing. Every time you sit with your pain instead of escaping it, that is the healing. Every time you cry and let your body release what it's been holding for lifetimes, that is the healing. And it's yours. No one else can do it for you, but no one else can take it from you either. You are not here by accident. You are here because your soul knew it was time. Time to stop hiding. Time to stop apologizing for being in process. Time to reclaim the parts of you that got buried beneath the addiction, the trauma, the fear. Those parts are not gone. They are waiting. They are still alive in you, untouched by shame, undamaged by the past. And when you reach for them, when you choose to believe you are still worthy of love, of peace, of joy, they will return. Not all at once, but steadily, like sunlight pouring through the cracks. So keep going, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because that's when the soul is doing its deepest work. That's when the karmic debris is burning away. That's when you're being rewritten from the inside out, not into someone else, but into more of who you've always been, a light, a guide, a healer, a soul that came here to remember and to help others do the same. You are the healing. You are the miracle, and everything you've walked through, every shadow you've faced, every moment you almost gave up, it all led you here, to this breath, to this choice, to this truth. You are not your past. You are not your addiction. You are not your shame. You are the soul that survived, the soul that rose, the soul that is rising still. And as you rise, you lift others with you. You teach by being. You heal by existing. You break the chains not just for yourself, but for all those who could not. This is your legacy. This is your power. This is your time. The healing is not far away, it is not hidden, it is not reserved for the pure, it is already within you, it always has been. And now, at last, you are ready to claim it, so do it boldly, do it gently, do it with the knowing that your soul has waited lifetimes for this return. And as you return to yourself, the universe smiles, because you have become exactly what you were always meant to be. You are the healing, you are the light, and your time is now.